fanciers from all over the world. Today, my co-host is going to be Stam Sprick, nice young man. He's going to be asking Doc Smiley, who's we're going to be interviewing today, a bunch of questions. Um, Good morning, guys. Well, afternoon, I think, where you guys are, right?
Good
Yeah, yeah.
morning, good afternoon.
Yeah. Good to see you guys. Doc, we've never met before. Welcome. Welcome to the podcast. Um,
Thank
I'm
you.
tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your roller history.
All right. Well, I'm almost 78 years old and I've had pigeons since I was 4 years old when my neighbor caught a young common squab and gave it to me. And my parents didn't think much about it, but I put it in a milk carton and had it for several days. And then I made a loft for it out of putting some poles up like a teepee and wrapping wire around there. And that's my first experience of having birds. And I've had rollers, Pinsom rollers since either 1955 or 56. I can't remember, but my neighbor was a Homer man and he always had different pigeons around. One day he told me, he said he was getting some Pinsom rollers from a man in California. And so I was excited to see what they did. He told me they turned backward flips. Well, when he got it, I went over and looked at it. I wanted him to turn it loose right away, and he said no, he had to settle it. But anyway, he told me one day to come over and watch it, and it was a black ball head Pinsom, and it turned out about 60, 70 feet, and I went home and I was elated about that, and so for I don't know a month or so, all I could do is supper table was talk about pigeons, about getting a roller pigeon. And so my mom called Mr. Bradshaw up and she said she wanted me to sell it. He wanted me to sell him a pair of birds. And so I went over there. Gave me a blank check and I went over there and picked out a black ball head with a light tortoiseshell hen and paid $1.50 for them both. And
Wow.
I lived in a small town in Hayes, Kansas, and we were kind of isolated out there. So nobody, there are a lot of pigeons there, but not rollers. And so we thought that the black and white pigeons were Pinsom rollers and the recessive reds were Birminghams. And that's all I ever saw until I moved to Topeka, Kansas. And there was an ad in the paper for rollers. And I went over and looked at the guys' rollers and I thought they were commons because they were bigger than mine and they were blue checks. And I said, I'd never seen a blue check roller. And he said, no, they're rollers. So he turned one loose and I watched it roll. And that's about, had them for 57 years. And, you know, I'm more than that and kept the line straight. I keep meticulous records on them and breeding records, and that's where I'm at.
So, Doc, all your rollers go back to those.
I can trace them. I can trace them back. Now I've had some out crosses, but I can trace them back to those first pigeons I got from Dale Bradshaw, and I tried to find out what they were from Pinsom, what they were from, and there's a couple of years of Pinsom's records that are gone or lost or so, and that was 55 or 56 when I got my birds. So I don't know what they're out of, but they're out of Pinsom's. I do know that.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. I mean, to have a family that long, and you're still holding on to them. So, have you been pretty competitive with them?
Uh, I'm not a good flyer. I'll be the first one to say that. I have last year I won the 4 section region in the 11 bird fly and got my hind end kicked in the championship round, But
Mm-hmm.
I other people have done real well flying my birds, and that my birds are a little smaller than most of the birds I see. I like a smaller bird. I think they spin a little better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow, that's pretty amazing. It's amazing to have rollers and the same family for that long. Um, I mean, there's a lot of us around these days. I don't know, how many people were, like you said, there weren't many people around when you first, got into rollers. Um, but boy, the hobby has grown so much. I mean,
Oh,
from one of the end of the country to the other.
yeah, it sure has. What amazes me is the diversity of colors we have in the birds now. I don't, I'm not real smart about all the colors and stuff, and I know the lute from a a blue bar, but I don't know all the indigos and all that stuff they're talking about. But I've over the years I've always tried to bring in an outcrossing. I've tried. I had some jackanets at crossed pretty good, and I had uh, the Pigeon Journal guy. Dave Gerke, I got a cock 1914 from him, which is one of the deepest birds he ever raised, and he crossed in real nice with my Pinsons, and I've had some Dick Stevens birds. They rolled real good and all that, but every one was grouse legged or muffed, and
Mm.
I just couldn't get around that. So I got rid of all of them. Uh, and I got a family of yellows that I've developed over the last 30 years, and I think they're the best in the country. I don't know. I may be bragging, but you know, last year I think I supplied 13 flyers with yellows,
Mm-hmm.
and
Wow.
this year so far I've only had three little yellows hatch, which everything in my loft almost carries yellow, but I've only had three dilutes so far.
So Doug, going back to those outcrosses that you did you do those just as an experiment, or did you do it out of needing to do it? Was your family digressing in any way, or were they just experiments, or
It was they were mostly experiments because even Pinson said you need to have an outcross once in a while to
right?
build the gene pool, and they were always birds that were pretty closely related to mine because my birds came from Pinson through Del Bradshaw, and then I had some other Pinsons that were from Frank Picklett in Topeka, Kansas, that he got from Rotenbacher, Hans Rotenbacher. And so those are the two lines of Pinsons I had. But I outcrossed them because you just need to do that once in a while.
Yeah, and did they have similar flying habits that yours did too?
Some of them did, and some of them didn't. I
Okay.
mean, uh, I had some birds from Rich Hayes that I got from Homer Griggs in Texas, and they are so much different than my birds. I mean, they're different in the loft, they're different in the air. They're just like they're the first ones to jump down and eat when you feed them, and you know, uh, they didn't cross too well with mine.
So pretty much you did an outcross, and then did you breed them back to your family,
Yes, I
right?
did.
Okay.
I
Okay.
I breed I breed father to daughter and son to mother and cousins together, and that
Hmm.
I've tried about every kind of arrangement like that you can do because well I've been in it for I've had them, you know 70 years. I've had pigeons, and so I've crossed a lot of stuff trying to see what I have, but I've always gone back to the Pensum lines and I've always kept a couple pair pure.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So, Doc, what did you find was your most successful cross?
The most successful cross was the Gurkey birds.
The
Dave
Gherkin.
Gurkey,
Mm-hmm.
Dave Gurkey's his band number was 1914, and he was the deepest bird at David's raised, and I think he's out of a Pelona bird, but everything that I put him on turned out to have youngsters that were quality keeper birds.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they don't. You can't raise 100%
Right.
rollers and others because if it was that easy, everybody would have them. I think it's a
Yeah.
recessive trait which causes them to roll. But if it was you know, not a recessive, but if it was a dominant trait, we'd all have 100 footers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you think that's probably the reason some guys say that um, breeding the deeper birds and kind of having breeding birds that are a little on edge, really helps keep the roll going.
Uh, I my theory on the roll is that deep bird's going to roll deep and a short bird's going to roll shallow, and that you can't put a short bird and a deep bird together because they don't work that way. They're not like colors mixing. They're either you're going to be a deep bird or that, and you have to. I have a few roll downs every now and then, and that's just what you get when you get deep birds.
Mhm.
But the experience I've had is that if you put your best to your best, you're going to be all right.
Okay. So
And
other than that, do you have any other specific breeding practices you use?
no, I breed off the birds that roll the best. I put them together, but they have to be pretty darn close together, down the family line. Like uh, in my loft, I've got 12 pair together right now in my loft, and 5 pair are birds that I got at the convention, or I got a pair of I got 2 pair of Rick Mee birds, and then I traded a yellow cock to Rick Shading a yellow cock for a pair of his birds, and then I over in the auction I bought some Steve Agent birds, and I've got them paired up there and trying to see what they'll do. I haven't I didn't have any luck flying them this year because when I settled them, why I live in an area that is a lot of trees around, and the hawks just picked them off, and I lost 2 kits of birds by not managing them well, settling them. So I'm back to square one to see what they do.
Okay, okay. So do you have a certain number of birds you try to raise per year to keep
I
your
I raise I get 100 bands every year, and I never ever raise 100 birds, 70 or 80. I think it's better to have a few pair of good birds than it is to have a lot of pairs of birds that are mediocre. And I think most pigeon fanciers and roller fanciers would agree with me that it's better to have a few good ones than a bunch of mediocres. And I think that over the country we have a lot of mediocre rollers.
Right. Quality, not quantity. But
Yeah,
we say that, but um to make it easy on ourselves, you almost got to breed a kit of birds every round, right?
yeah,
To
yeah.
you know,
Well, I've been
there are
breeding.
and they could be in sense fillers, but they just in your mind, do they train better that way if you're cranking out 20 birds per round, right? Versus if you're trying to combine half a kit one round, half a kit the next round, right?
Yeah, they
Or
do. They do better if you raise a kit at a time and have 2 or 3 kits instead of try to put them together. Now at the end of the year or so, when I'm getting ready for competition to fly, sometimes I trade birds in and out of kits and get an A team and a B team and that. But the the birds themselves they're closely related, so they act pretty much by instinct, doing what they want to do, and I don't have a bunch of problems with it.
Mhm.
I Only one time in all the years I've bred pigeons, one year for years I only had a nine whole loft. Yeah, my breeding loft. I breed individual pens now. I only had nine pair in there. One time in all the time I've been raising birds did I have that year I had 18 eggs that were fertile, 18 and hatched, and 18 that made it to the flying kit and that stuff. But
Yeah.
most of the time I have about 80% fertility rate in
Okay.
my birds.
Yeah, I
But
often hear
And
guys say, you might as well just get rid of the first round, you know, because the first round always seems to be, infertile eggs, one baby,
mhm.
something
Yeah.
goes wrong there.
Yeah.
I've always said every year, I'm gonna get rid of the first round. I never do it.
Me too. Yep. Yeah.
I never do
Well,
it. I mean, how about you, Doc?
I fall in love with my birds,
Uh-huh.
and I really don't sell birds or anything. I've given birds to numerous people, and uh, sometimes I get some good birds, and sometimes I get stuff it should be junk. But you never know until you don't know what your bird's going to do until you fly it.
Right.
And like I say, I'm not a good flyer. If I was, I'd do better than I've done. But I really enjoy it, and that I love the birds. That's what it's about. Uh, these yellows that I have, uh, I wrote an article for the journal for the bulletin, and I said that the name of the article was "Did Pinson Have Yellows?" And I wrote the article, and I had one guy call me and almost he did everything but call me a liar, and he said Pinson didn't have yellows, and I know he might not have had any, but the birds that I had, the recessive reds that I had, popped out the first yellow I'd ever seen because I didn't know what it was when I was a kid. Didn't
Mhm.
have any down on it. Its eyes were kind of glassy looking, and the body was pink, and it turned out to be yellow, and that's where the start of the yellows come. But I have I've crossed in some yellows from a Hathaway bird back years ago. That was a yellow grizzle that really smoked, and then I get a yellow hen from Kenny man that was good. And recently, in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, I can't remember what year it was, but Henry Cook had a line of yellow birds, and I got a lot of Henrys when he passed on, and they're good birds. My cream bars come from Henry, but the everybody's crazy about the yellows, and my goal is to have a kid of yellows, just yellows alone, and see how they do. But
Yeah.
I may not.
Oh, well, talking about the yellows, Doc. I mean, what it seems to me that you're really high on them. What do you feel is special about them? I mean, are they?
I just like the color about them, and they're they're good. Yellow is a good loft bird. I mean, they're not wild. They're tame. They take care of their babies. You reach in, look at them, they slap your hand and that stuff. And I try never to breed yellows to yellows, but once in a while I have to because the numbers aren't there.
Mhm.
But usually I have a yellow on a red check or on a recessive red or a red bar. And but right now I've got well, yellow pair. I put a cream bar cock on a yellow hen, but the old cream bar cock is the second time they've had eggs and they're not fertile, so I think he's wore out. So, but they're nice sized birds. They're tame and they fly and kit well, and they're 25, 30 foot and pretty frequent with not the best velocity in the world, but they're good. They're good, exceptional birds.
So what are you seeing? You say that you try not to breed yellow to yellow. But what are you seeing if you do breed yellow to yellow?
Sometimes the feather is not good.
Okay.
It's a weak feather,
Right.
and once in a while the yellow has a little bit of trouble hatching out of the egg. I've found that
Okay.
over the years, but some of the yellows are come out of blue, have blue background in them, and you can tell that
Mm-hmm.
on their rump. It's blue.
Right, right.
Mhm. So,
Yeah.
Doc, what do you what is your breeding process? I mean, what is your criteria for pulling a bird? Well, you mentioned that, it has to be good in the air. You try to put best to best. Um, so do you make birds that are just similar to each other in a lot of ways?
Yeah, all my birds are similar. They're the same size. If they were all one color, you couldn't tell them apart.
Mhm.
And I know when uh, Farr was down here judging my birds one year, and he told my brother, he said, "I like your brother's birds because he said all mine are black." And you know, mine are different. Mine are different colors. I got bars, and I got ball heads, and I got marked birds, and I got grizzles, and I got tortoise shells. And what I like to do is just take the bird and put them together on how they spin. I put the best to the best, and like this year on 5 pair of birds, I've got they're all related. They're all sons or daughters or brothers or sisters on 5 of them, and that's my number one pair. And I breed individual pins, and I wean the birds just as quick as I can and put them in an individual kit pen and see if to go that way on them. But they're just they're fun, and it's two things I know: don't put two birds together that have the same fault. And don't try to think you're going to put two birds together and old lady luck's going to come up and kiss your hind end and give you a good bird, because it doesn't work out that way. I know guys that throw in 10 cocks and 10 hens and just let them breed the way they want to. Why, you can do that, but I don't think you'll be very successful doing it.
Right.
But who am I to say? I just, if I enjoy a bird, I enjoy a bird.
So what do you feed your breeders?
I feed my breeders. I feed them the mix from Des Moines, Iowa breeders mix without corn, but also I put Purina Gold in there, because I found that if I feed Purina Gold, then I don't have to supplement my water with calcium. And for years there, I was having a hard time. The hens go down from laying in that because they weren't getting enough calcium, and it was hard to get calcium to them. But I found out by using that Purina Gold mix that it's got plenty of calcium, and I hadn't had a bit of problem since then. And I worm my birds with Ivamec. I put it right in the water before I put them together, and then I worm them 3 times a year. And the Ivamec in the water does great. And I feed my flyers. I feed them hard red wheat, and they'd like to have more, but that's all they get.
Hard red wheat. That's it.
Yeah, yeah. And it takes about 3 weeks to get them in shape to fly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I fly them pretty hard.
So do you also feed your youngsters red wheat from the start?
No, not until they mature.
Oh, okay.
When coming off the nest, they get the same mix at them, and they got fed by their mom and dad, because I think they need that to build their body up, and that. Then after I have them settle in that and start flying them, then I feed them wheat. That's all they get.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I also always have a round rabbit salt, a red mineral salt for rabbit salt, and I just put it in the grit dish, and they eat it. They go crazy when I put it in there.
Oh, I bet. Go ahead, Sam. You had a question?
Yeah. So tell us your reasoning. I know other guys, they are wheat guys too. And do you just feed wheat just to keep things simple, or is it really what's worked best for you?
It's worked best for me, because if you mix a mixed feed and put it down there, you don't know what they're getting, because one bird might get over there and eat all the peas, or eat all the milo, or eat all the safflower, or the millet, or what before the other one. So I just give them wheat, and that way I know they all have the same thing. And it takes a while to learn which birds are. Some of them eat more than others, and
Mm-hmm.
some of them want to come in and trap down quicker, because but after, like I said, it takes me about 3 weeks to get them flying good. But the red wheat is good.
Okay. So then for your young birds, you say you feed the mix that you feed their parents, right? And
When they start
are you
flying
pretty
hard,
right?
red
Are you
wheat.
pretty generous on the amount that you're giving those young birds?
No, they get about an ounce apiece. They
Okay.
get just what you can cover in the palm of your hand, and it's about an ounce. And I have, I'm I'm real hard headed. I've got an old dish soap plastic holder that I made into a scoop. And for 20 birds, I know exactly where it has to be on that scoop for 20 birds with the wheat. And I've had that thing 25 years probably.
Yeah, that's
And
pretty interesting. I've never heard that before.
something else that I do, it's different. Most people, I use wooden boxes, 7¼ inches by 7¼ inches, and I have a little lip on it so I can raise it up and pick it up, and it's 2.5 inches high. And that's what I use for my nesting boxes. And there's 2 of those boxes for each pair of birds, and I use pine needles for the nesting material.
Okay.
And I let them make their own nests. But I also, another thing I do, I pick up every baby I have every day. I pick it up and look at it from the day they hatch until I wean them. It makes them tamer.
Yeah,
Yeah, sure does.
I
Yeah.
bet. I get the feeding the wheat thing, and starting the young birds on the mix, because that's what they're used to. There was something Sam asked, are you liberal with the feed when they first start? And I can tell you for myself um, that with the young birds, I'm pretty stuck on how much I feed them. I mean, because I want them to trap. We're in the training mode, and they need to know how to trap. But as they get older, um, I've got some birds out there that are, some yearlings, and then some that are older. I can feed those birds because I feed wheat and Milo, 3-to-1 ratio, and the three ratio is wheat. The rest is Milo. um, I can get, no matter, I can feed them until they stop eating completely, leave food into the tray. But after they've flown, when they come down, they trap. But it's out of habit.
Yeah.
It's not. I
Yeah,
think it's not because they're hungry. They're definitely
Mhm.
not hungry. But that's just a training thing. I don't know. I mean, do you find something similar, Doc? I mean, do you?
I mine are the same way. And when they come down, the first bird that goes in is usually the first bird every time. The last one to go in is the last one. And
Right.
sometimes I have to get a shoe stick and run him over there to get him in. But they all trap real quick because I keep them half hungry and
Mhm.
that stuff. And then I also notice that each bird has his own perch. And I can look in there and see if any are missing just by what perch is open.
Yeah.
And my perches are square boxes they're 10 inches wide and 7 inches high for the rollers. I see people building lofts, and I look at their lofts, and I just sometimes I smile because the perches are too big, and they want to nest in the perches. A friend of mine had a carpenter build him a loft that knew absolutely nothing about pigeons, and he made the perches out of 1x12s. So instead of perching, they wanted them nest.
Yeah. So, back to that feeding thing. Do you have the feed ready to go in there before they trap in, or do you feed them when they've all trapped in?
When 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 they no, I put the feed down there before they trap in, and then I open the trap and let them go in there. Usually, I don't use bobs. I just use an open hole that I have a cover over. And when they come down, they're usually on there and ready to go. And I put the feed down, walk around, pull the cover off, and like I say, the number one bird goes in there. He's the quickest. They're it's kind of in a pecking order, but that there's usually one that hangs out last. But they get in there, and if they hesitate, they lose. You snooze,
Right.
you
It
lose.
balances the kid out. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Well, so when do you find your young birds come into the roll?
My young birds, they used to be 10 months, but now they're a little quicker. They're coming in 5 or 6 months, and I have some early birds, but the ones that roll early for me usually pop the ground. And last year during the fly, I had three it was my number two kit that I flew. I flew the first kit, and then I flew the number two kit, and I had 11 bird kit, and I had three of them smack the ground. And I don't know if I had too little feet or what on them, but they hadn't smacked before, but they did then, and they're no longer with me.
Did they, I mean, did you get rid of them or what?
They killed themselves. One of them hit the chair that I call it my pigeon watching station. It's a lawn chair that I had made, and I had it special made so I can get in and out of it real easy. And one of them hit that, and it didn't even wiggle when it hit the ground. That was done.
Wow.
But
Do you would you relate that to the early development? I mean, is that
I don't know what caused it, because none of the birds out of that pair, none of the other birds rolled down. So I can't tell you. But and this one had never rolled down, except that's the first day it rolled down. And like I say, I was cutting the feed way back on getting them to fly, and so but three of them out of that number two kit hit the ground that day. And
so it could be feed?
it could be feed. It could be a lot of things.
Yeah, yeah, it could be a
Yeah.
lot of them. So once the birds start to develop, do you change anything?
No, not really. Once they start developing, I fly them hard every day, and call a few out, and that any outbirds I get rid of. If I've got a bird that's doesn't want a kit, I don't care how good it rolls, it's gone, because you can't score if they're not together, and so
Mhm.
that's the way it is. But I don't change too much on them.
Wow. Yeah, it's I guess it's well, non-kidding birds. I like we said in a interview a couple of days last one we did, they're a distraction. Not only a distraction to you, but a distraction to the rest of the kit. So do you find that your birds have a pretty good breaking ability, Doc,
Um,
as a
some
group?
years I do, some years I don't. It just depends on the birds. Like 2012 was a year that I raised excellent birds, and I don't know what it was I did different, but 2012, a lot of birds in my loft were from that 2012. There's still a couple in there that are 2012 birds that I'm breeding out of, but uh, I had a bird that was raised in 2012. His band number is 484 and he's a bronze Pinson cock, and I put him on 484 blue check hen. It's a Pinson, and everything out of those things rolled. And so all my birds, not all of them, but a bunch of them in there I have that bronzy look to them now, and that. But I can tell you, if I could tell you that, I'd be telling you a lie, because I don't know. And I keep pretty good records on them, know what they do, but I don't know how to get them top shape and pick out this and then that one. It's
So
it's hard to do.
as far as your selecting criteria, can you tell us what your main like teamwork? So is teamwork not one of the things that you usually select for as the,
I
you
select.
know,
I don't want. I don't breed out any roll downs. They're gone. I don't breed out any birds that are out birds. But when I'm selecting birds, I want them as closely matched as possible. Just like some birds, roll 15 foot or so. I put them on a bird that's about the same, because, like I say, I'm not going to take a 35 footer and put on a 15 footer and get a 20 footer.
Yeah.
You just don't do that. I breed a lot with the body type. My birds all have the same body type now. They look alike. If you take the color off of them and look alike, you couldn't tell them apart. So that's way to do that. And just like this year, I have two paired together at the same. We're paired up the same last year, and I find that if you find a pair of clicks, use them and burn them out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I foster those birds. I let the hens lay all the eggs, because the hens only got so many eggs in her anyway. I try to, on the good hens, I try to raise, and the good cocks, I try to foster them out and get a pair as many as I can that way.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions. Do you keep the breeders together every year, or do you break them up and repair?
I break them up every year, and then what I do, I put the cocks that I'm going to breed out of the next year. I leave them in the breeding loft and open their sections up and let them take over and have the loft together. And then I put the hens in with them. And like I say, this year I've got two pair that were the same as last year, because they produce spinners, and that's what I wanted.
So do you breed out of the same pairs every year, or do you?
No.
You made them a different way each
Sometimes,
year?
well, for example, a pair I have together this year, I have a cockbird on his granddaughter.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then I have a hen that's on her grandson.
Mm-hmm.
And I got 12 pair in there. Let me think what I have. I got three pairs that are just like they were last year.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is because everything out of them was pretty decent, and they fit what I wanted.
Mm-hmm. So how long are you giving those birds that you're trying out to stock? Like 2 years if they don't produce anything for you? Are they going back in the kit box? Do you like to refly breeders, or?
If they don't, I give them a year, and if they don't produce anything, I put them in the kit box.
So
And
one mating?
1 year's mating, yeah.
Okay.
I've that cockbird I was talking to you about, that 448, excuse me. He didn't do a thing until he was 2 years old. He flew good and kitted good and stuff, but didn't do anything. And one day I was watching him, and he cut off a 100-foot roll. And I thought, "What are you doing?" And I flew him. I flew him in the kit until the flies were over, and then I bred from him. And this is the third year I'm breeding from him, and he's a 12, born in 2012. But half the birds in my loft now got that bronze going to them.
Wow. So, wow, that's a good thing you just mentioned there. I was wondering if you've been around and had pigeons for a lot of years. What would you say is some of the worst advice a person has ever given you when it comes to pigeons?
The worst advice a person could do is buy something off of paper. Mm-hmm. Buy a pedigree. Guys are selling pedigrees. Just because it says good on a pedigree or it's out a certain bird doesn't mean it. If you want to buy good rollers, pick them out of the air. Mm-hmm. And I very seldom do I sell a bird, and the reason I don't is because if somebody gets it and it's not satisfied with it, I don't know. I'm saying Doc Smiley screwed me on this bird, So I don't do that. But the worst advice you can get is, most people have too damn many birds that they're trying to mess with, and then The second one is, you know, they're novice. They don't know what they're doing, and they don't know a good roll from a bad roll. I drove to Winona, Minnesota one time. Guy had some fireball rollers that he Graham fireballs that he had, and I called him and talked to him, and he said, "Oh yeah, they're great. They're 35 foot, and they all roll in a bunch and that." So my wife and I drove to Winona, Minnesota from Topeka, Kansas, and got up there, and he turned his birds loose. And first of all, they were long and kind of looked like powders. They were all blue bar ball heads, and they all rolled, but they rolled and made loops as big as a bushel basket. And he said, "How many you want?" And I said, "I don't believe I want any." But talking to him on the phone was like they were the best rollers around. And
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
people need to observe more than one fancier's birds and more than one kid of birds before they, you know, get what they want. I had a guy call me one time and he said he wanted basically what he wanted. He wanted tight, fast, deep spinning birds, and he wanted to buy a whole kit of them. And I said, you just can't do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think some people probably, especially if you're new, you probably don't realize that. I mean, if you knew the pigeons, you probably don't realize that that you know. I mean, I was just thinking a second ago at some of the guys that we've spoken to, have been around for years, and none of them have. I hear guys say they're breeding out of 30 pair of pigeons. None of them are breeding. None of the older guys that we've talked to are breeding out of 30 and 25 pair of pigeons. They're breeding out of the best they have, and I would say that they average about 12 pair to 15 at the most.
Yeah.
And even that's a lot, right? I mean, if
Well,
you
if you have four good pair and you have fosters, why, that's enough.
right,
Bonnie Nagel told me, he said, "Doc," he said, if you have a pair of birds and it raises your one champion bird, they're a keeper pair, And Monty, look how many times he won the World Cup and stuff, one of the best flyers around. And then I was fortunate enough to pick Heinz. Is it Beaker or Biker? You know who I'm talking about?
yeah, biker.
Yeah,
Biker.
Biker. I was fortunate enough to spend a whole afternoon with him because he was getting his clothes washed by the lady at where we were at, and so I got to pick his brain. And I thought for 5 or 10 minutes when I was talking to him that he was full of bull until we really got down talking like you and I are, and that man knew what he's doing. And like he told me, he said, "I haven't really seen a good kid of birds in the United States here yet, and in this area." And I was thinking to myself, because I watched the birds fly, and I wouldn't, if I was judging them, I wouldn't have scored them because they didn't roll 10 feet.
Mm-hmm.
They were often, but they didn't roll 10 feet. And I was friends with Roger Baker. You know who Roger Baker is?
Yes,
Roger
sir.
developed the blue lace, and he and I we spent he and I and Picklett and a couple other guys, Ed Loomis, down to Oklahoma City, stayed up till 2 o'clock in the morning having a roundtable discussion about all this stuff. And if you can glean one bit of information from somebody, why it's good, something that you didn't know.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Speaking of Roger Baker, this interview is about you. But speaking of Roger Baker, whatever happened to his blue lace stuff?
I don't know. I had some of his blue lace because Picklett got some, but Picklett got some of my yellows, and he traded some of my yellows to Roger Baker for the blue lace, and so I got a couple pair of blue lace, and they were hot. They were small, they were hot and that stuff, but I don't have any of the blue lace anymore, and I don't know where they're at. Willie Sylvie wanted to know a couple of years ago whether I had any birds with any blue lace birds, and I said I got an old hen. It's carrying it, but she never produced any more for me.
Mm-hmm.
But and you know who Hugo Blas is?
Yes, sir.
Hugo told me when he was living in Lawrence, Kansas, he said, take your pinsons and put them in a pen by themselves and don't cross them with anybody else's. That's what he told me.
Uh-huh. And that's what you've done?
Pretty much so. I've
Yeah.
added out birds to them because the gene pool just gets too close.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the closer it gets, the more the bad things are going to come out, just like the good things.
Mhm, mhm.
Like I had a pair of birds I put together, and I raised 12 little ones out of them. Every one of the little ones had their wings down below their tail, like tumblers. And
Yeah.
I didn't put those two together again.
Mhm. Wow. Well, you
So
you we talked about the worst information piece of information that you've ever been given. What would you say is the best um you know best little tab that someone has given you that's really helped you in the hobby?
Don't put two birds together with the same fault. Bobby
Mhm,
Evertson, one of the best pigeon people I know, told me that. And
mhm.
he's the only one that also said, don't put two birds together and think Lady Luck's going to come up and kiss you in the hind end and give you something. But, you know, look and see what you can see. And when you see what you want, then put them together and put your best to your best
Mhm.
and call hard because
yeah.
there's not
So
the,
can we? All right. So Doug, if let's talk about that a little bit. They're not robots, and so we can only pick the best of what we got. So with your young birds, I don't know if you have this problem or not, but when they're going through that development problem or period, do you have some that bump a few times and then they snap out of it?
oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. There's a difference between a roll down and a bumper. Okay.
Yeah.
You see when it rolls down and when he hits the ground, he's kind of woozy and that stuff, and you can kind of tell. And then you can tell the one that's a bumper, and you can tell the ones that are going to wind up and hit the ground. They're going to hit the ground every time you fly them. And yeah, I have birds that come into land and they hit and they bounce off the ground, or when you turn them loose, they come out there so hot that they hit the ground, but they get back up in the air and fly.
But if those birds snap out of it, a lot of times do they end up going in your breeder loft or is that the
Oh
straight
yeah,
out for them?
once in a while they do. I've got a
Okay.
I've got a Steve Agent bird in there right now, a red bar and Mark bird, and he hit the ground twice, and so I just kept flying him. I said, "You're going to kill yourself. You're going to kill yourself," and he didn't do it. But two times, like he rolled down one day and I held him up for about a week and then put him out again. He rolled down. I thought, well, I'll give him one more try. And after that, he didn't ever roll down again. And he rolled about 25 foot.
Hmm.
But yeah, you know, you can't help but having a few roll downs. I mean, you're going to have some that don't roll, some that don't do anything, and then you're going to have a few roll downs, and then I figure if you raise 12 birds and you get four that are keepers out there, you're doing well.
So
And
would you say that if you're too strict on the birds, you're going to run out of roll over the years?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
You can breed the roll out of them a lot quicker than you can put it back in them.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I would say sometimes, Sam, I mean, in my experience, I don't know if this is docs, that sometimes the young birds, their mind and their body are working at different levels. Like
Yeah.
physically they're not, their bodies aren't ready for the role.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah, but mentally, they think they can do it. Well, it's like an old man like me.
Yeah.
I used to, I used to could run, all day long, and I still think I can do it, but I can't. So, my
I'm,
mind and body are in two different levels. And
I'm
I think
with you
that's
there.
yeah, I think that's sort of where the birds are. Um, what do you
Yeah.
think, Doc? I mean,
Yeah, the birds are all different. They're all individuals, but they're all alike.
mm,
And You know, it's the genes that they inherit when you put them together, and a bad gene's a bad gene. You know, there might be a gene in there that lets one get sick, another one might not. I don't know. I don't vaccinate my birds, and never have, and probably never will. Uh, I don't doctor them too much. If I have a bird that gets sick, why, I take it down to. I live in Arkansas, and Arkansas is kind of chicken capital of the world, and so they have chicken vets around here, and the state's got a lab that I can take a bird over to the lab and sacrifice it. You can't take a dead one over there, but take a live one over there and let them kill it and do a necropsy on it, and they can tell you exactly what's wrong with it. And if I have a sick bird, that's what I do. I read on Facebook, the guys say, "Oh, I've got a bird that's got this," and there might be 15 or 20 different answers on there, what to feed the bird or what to do. And you're not going to know till you test. Take
Hmm.
the bird to a lab and have a necropsy done on it, and then you'll know. Uh, but you know, you got to keep your birds healthy. Crowding is the worst thing you can do with birds. Is crowd them, and that's the worst thing.
Yeah,
And you,
people should really, if they get time. I know Danny Galarza, he went Facebook Live last year, right, at your place and showed the inside of your loft. And the guys should really check that out. You got big kit boxes with expanded metal floor on the ground. It's a lot of ventilation in there. So,
yeah. Well, I've been building lofts for a long time, and all my lofts that I've ever built have been on that kind of scale, on that design. Like I had a dream one night that I was going to build a loft, and I was going to use oak timbers and oak 2x4s. And a patient of mine happened to have a sawmill and had oak, and so I told him what I wanted, and he brought me over the oak floors and the timbers and everything I needed to build it out of oak. And I said, "What I owe you?" And he said, $102. And I gave him $100 bill, and he said, "That's close enough." And that's my loft that I have right now. A dream came true.
Wow.
And the only thing I wished that I'd made it a little bigger, but my wife said that's big enough. you know.
So,
yeah.
so, Doc, if well, that toxic, the expanded metal. Yeah, I mean, good ventilation. It shows how important it is because not only for you but for the birds. When a guy has had birds as long as you have, I mean, a lot of people get sick from the bloom from the birds. They get,
Yeah.
yeah, so.
Yeah. Well, I had a spot on my lung about 3 months ago, and I had an X-ray taken. They discovered a spot on my lung, and so I told the doctor. I said, "Hey, I've been a pigeon raiser for 70 years, and anyway, they checked me out for that, and it wasn't, the spot on my lung was benign, and it wasn't from, I didn't have any pigeon disease or anything. But yeah, Arden Bayless in Topeka, Kansas had to get rid of his birds because he was allergic to and he kept coughing and stuff. And finally, when they figured it out, he got rid of his birds and he got well.
Mhm, mhm.
But
Yeah,
yeah, you can get a lot of stuff from them.
yeah. I'm sure you've there's been a lot of guys that we've known that's had to get rid of birds for that reason. So it shows how important ventilation is. So, Doc, if you had any good advice, you got any good advice for new people coming into the hobby, and also for us on how to get new people into the hobby? You
Well,
know.
I would say for people coming into the hobby, if they want to get birds, the first thing they need to do is build them a loft.
Mhm.
Because I used to have guys come over and want birds. And you have a loft? No. I say, you build one. If you build one, I know you're serious. I'll give you birds. I'll fill your loft up with good quality birds and that stuff. And most people don't have the faintest idea how to build a loft. Your loft should, the top of your loft, now the top of my loft is a gable end, but where the birds are, it's only 4 inches higher than my head. And the reason that is so the birds can't fly over your head and get wild. And the purchase should be the proper size purchase, and the nest box the proper size. And if you got different kind of birds, that's going to vary. But I would tell a person to start now to build themselves a lot. Go talk to some fanciers and see what they're doing, and ask them about feed, just like you guys are doing, and water, and the whole works about them, because there's a whole lot more than to just grabbing them, throwing in a pen, and throwing feed to them once a day. Uh, you got to be able to recognize sick bird. Sick bird is going to be down on your floor, and his feathers are going to be ruffled up, and he's going to be standing there not looking shiny and good. But before you jump into something, find out about it.
Thanks for that advice, Doc. So, what do you contribute your longevity in the hobby to?
I just love them. I don't know. I can't tell you. My brother's a golfer. I'm a pigeon raiser. And well, I tell you what, part of it is my mother. My mother, I told you I had that teepee for a loft. I come home from school one day and she said, "Come go with me." And I went with her, and she went over to a guy's place, and he had built me a loft that would fit in the back of a pickup truck so he could haul it over there. And so that was my first good loft. And then in 1955 or 56, my parents built a garage, a double car garage, and my father had a loft built back there for me. And it was exactly the same as Dale Bradshaw's loft, my Homer buddy. And so my mom and dad have been real. One day my dad asked me, he said, "What do you like about those pigeons?" I said, "What do you like about golf?" And he said, "I love them." And I said, "That's my pigeons." And he said, "I understand." And after that, he never bitched about me having a bird or needing to get money to get feed or anything. But they got me in a lot of trouble too. I mean, I remember I crawled up on the railroad trestle there in Hays, Kansas, where the the railing went up at about a 45-degree angle. I crawled clear up on top of that thing to check the birds in the nest there. And then I was walking across it to the other side, and the train was coming, and I was smart enough to get down and wrap my legs around the rail and hang on, because it about shook me off of there. And
Wow.
then I fell in the water, and the police came and wanted to know if I'd fallen off of the bridge and that stuff. And I said, "No, I fell in the water getting this bird." But, you know,
What did
that's,
they
I
What
love
did
the
they say?
birds.
What did
I love the birds.
What did they say?
What they say? Well, they took me home to my mother, and my mother scolded me and thanked them for bringing me home, and told me that I couldn't go somewhere for about a week and that stuff. But that's all right. I stayed at home with my birds.
That's a good story, Doc. Sam, you have any more questions for Doc Smiley?
Um, Not really. I think we went over some good stuff. I think if there's anything, Doc, you can tell us that you do differently from other people, because that's kind of the nitty-gritty stuff that we're after talking to these guys. Um, just stuff that you do that others don't, that you think is a good key, something that we haven't gone over yet.
Well, don't be afraid to lose. That's what I'm telling you.
Yeah.
I've lost way more than I've won, but the camaraderie of the people that come to my loft, and that, I like to have them stay overnight. We talk birds, because I don't get to talk birds a lot of times with people, because there's not too many around here to have them, and without going somewhere. But it's just something that I love, and I probably I'll have until I die. And I'm trying to get into the World Cup. I'm trying to get into the Hall of Fame. I've been nominated a couple times, but never got the mustard to get in. I'm hoping I get in this year, but if I do, I do. If I don't, I don't. It's still been a ride. I'll tell you though, every year I raise some kind of different birds. I've had Modinas, I've had Kings, I've had tumblers, I've had fantails, I've had bodinas, I've had nuns, I've had owls, cardinals, helmets. Every year I raise, in the last 2 or 3 years, so I haven't done it because I haven't had an open hole for them. But, get you something besides the rollers for a while.
Well, cool. Well, it's been a really good interview. It's really nice to meet you. I want to thank Sam for joining us today. Sam, how old are you, man?
I'm 23.
23 years old. Sam's
Yep.
23 years old, and he's hooked. I can tell you that on rollers.
Yeah.
So, we're going to close off the interview, but in closing, I want to say, support, promote, and enjoy. And when I say support, I mean support your local flies, support your local clubs, support the NBRC, all the flies that we have. When I talk about promote, I mean, when you go out, we go to pigeon shows, fancy pigeons, and promote the hobby to the guys around there. Some of the guys.
I support the pigeons. I fly in all the flies, and I donate to the auctions and stuff. And one of the things I did get to do when I was over in Oklahoma at the show, Oklahoma City, I got to meet Mike Tyson in person. Iron Mike was there, and he's a little different, but he was there. But just enjoy your birds. That's what it's all about. You don't have to go anywhere. You just go out in your backyard and turn them loose and watch them fly. And that's about all I have to say. I hope somebody gleaned some bit of information off of this. It's worth having. And I thank you.
Well, and I want to reiterate what Doc said. The last thing I had to say was enjoy. Everybody wants to win, and we're all competitive, but really when it comes down to it, the person that sees your birds the most are you, and enjoy it. That's why we have them. So again, support, promote, and enjoy. And Doc, thanks again. And Sam, thanks again for stepping up and helping out in the interview. And I hope to see you here again.
All right. You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Doc. And it's nice to meet you.
Bye.